heard someone say, the house didn't appraise, and immediately thought, well, I guess the deal is dead? Not necessarily. I've been getting a lot of questions from my buyers lately about appraisals, what they are, why they matter, and what it means when the appraised value comes in at, above, or below the contract price. So let's talk about it. Hey everyone, it's Danielle Taylor with Keller Williams Realty here on the beautiful Outer Banks. And first things first, what exactly is an appraisal? So here's the thing. Basically, an appraisal is an independent opinion of a property's value completed by a licensed appraiser. So if you're financing your purchase, your lender will typically order the appraisal to make sure that the home provides enough collateral for the money that they're lending you. Let that sink in for just a minute because this is a really important distinction. The appraisal is primarily for the lender. They want to make sure that there is sufficient value in the property to support the loan. An appraisal is not the same as a home inspection. The appraiser is not testing every system. They aren't searching for every possible repair. Instead, they're looking at the big picture, like the location, the size, the age and condition, recent comparable sales, and what's currently happening in the market. Here on the Outer Banks, that can get pretty complicated very quickly. Two homes may look very similar on paper, but one may have a better view. It might have easier beach access or a more desirable floor plan. Maybe it has stronger rental income or potential, nicer updates or location. And all of these things simply matter differently to different buyer. So now what happens when the appraisal comes back? If it comes in at or above contract price, everybody breathes a sigh of relief and the transaction moves forward and we're all happy. And just to be clear, if the home appraises for higher than the contract price, the buyer doesn't have to pay more to the seller or renegotiate the price. Everybody simply smiles and moves forward. And that value is typically not shared with the seller. That's something the buyer's just benefiting from. But what happens if the contract price comes in above the appraisal price? Let's say you agree to purchase a home for $800,000, but the appraisal comes back at $775,000. The lender will generally base the loan on the lower of the purchase price or the appraised value. That doesn't necessarily mean they won't make the loan. It simply may mean that the buyer has to bring more cash to closing or find a different solution to the issue. But here's what I really want you to hear. A low appraisal does not automatically mean the house is overpriced. This is key. An appraisal is one licensed professional's opinion of value at one point in time based largely on available data. In a neighborhood with plenty of recent, nearly identical sales, establishing that value could be fairly straightforward. Here on the Outer Banks, though, properties vary tremendously. As we know, location, amenities, income, all of those things can dramatically change the value of a property. There can also be a timing issue. So buyers are often making offers based on today's market, exactly what's happening in today's market. Well, an appraiser is usually relying more heavily on properties that were under contract or sold several months ago. So especially in a changing market, it's really important that you understand that the contract price and the appraised value may not line up perfectly. This also happens with unique properties. So if the appraisal comes in below the contract price, do not panic. This is not the end of the world. There are options. Here's an example. I recently had a client who knew a certain condo building in the Outer Banks very, very well due to family members already owning in that complex. A unit came on the market in the complex that is one of only 6 in the entire building that has unobstructed views. And also, to boot, it was right next door to the property that their family owned. So they were willing to pay whatever it took to get that for their family. And when the appraisal came back under contract price, they were just comfortable bringing more to closing. Also, a buyer can ask the seller to reduce the price and be part of the solution. Remember, the seller's not required to agree. The other thing that could happen is the buyer and seller could negotiate some system where the buyer comes up with a little more cash and the seller comes down a bit in price. There might be a meeting in the middle. And in some instances, and this is not very common, so take this with a grain of salt, but you can challenge the appraisal if there's factual errors or stronger comparable sales that weren't considered. And ultimately, yes, in some transactions, the buyers may choose not to move forward, but that really depends heavily on how far apart it is, what the terms are, what financing they're getting, and where the buyer is in their purchase process. Now, what happens if we have a cash buyer? Does an appraisal matter? Well, because there isn't a lender involved, a cash buyer usually doesn't go ahead and get an appraisal, doesn't spend the money they're not required to in most instances. Sometimes, though, they choose to because they like additional reassurance, and some buyers just feel really strongly about needing a property to appraise at contract price. Others may be perfectly happy and comfortable moving forward without an appraisal. Here's the easiest way to think about it. An appraiser helps answer how much value can a lender support. It doesn't answer what is this particular home worth to this particular buyer. A low appraisal can absolutely create a challenge, but it doesn't automatically mean that someone made a mistake, and it certainly doesn't always mean that the deal is over. So if you're considering buying or selling here on the Outer Banks and have questions about how an appraisal could affect you and your transaction, I'm always happy to help you talk it through. Please make sure that you reach out, make sure you subscribe so you're getting all of our information, and make sure you're getting our monthly newsletter so you stay on top of the market data. Because remember, there's no better living than Sandbar living.